Shavua Tov, Rabbi.
Oh, Dave, how are you?
Well, thanks, you.
Thank God.
How was your fast?
Baruch Hashem, we fast well, thank God.
Good. I didn't attempt it.
Can you see me or am I too dark?
Pardon, Rabbi?
Can you see me or am I too dark?
Quite dark. The light behind you is...
Oh, better, huh?
Yeah, that's
Gotta close
better.
the curtains, but I prefer to have the sunlight.
Yes, that's better. Now we can see your face.
Hello, Kent. Hello, John. Hello, Winston.
Hello, Rabbi. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, Kent. Hello, David.
Hello.
Hey, John.
A famous piece of Rambam coming up today. My privilege to have that it fell on my lot, on my watch. All about tzedakah. And I'll just give it 1 minute and we'll start. I'll be right back. All right, 500,000 we got. Let us begin. We're concluding the section of Matnot Aniyim, which is gifts to the poor. We had some technical stuff with the fields and the corners and the gleanings, but this is now very straightforward. And I'll just introduce it by saying that it applies not only to givers of tzedakah, but also to recipients. there are values and rules for both. So most of it is to do with the giver, but we do have at the end some of the obligations of the receiver as well. Chayoven onu lehizoher b'mitzvah tzedakah yosim mikol mitzvahs aseh. We are obligated to be careful with God the mitzvah tzedakah more than any other positive commandment. How's that? Let's see what note number 1 has to say. Where's the notes? What happened to the notes? Oh, here they are. Oh, elsewhere it says that tzedakah is equivalent to all the mitzvahs. If you put all the mitzvahs on one side of the scale and tzedakah on the other, it would balance. Because tzedakah is an identifying mark of the righteous person, and it is a genetic quality in the descendants of Abraham, our father. As the verse says, that God knew Abraham, which means also he loved him, because he commands his children to do tzedakah. So the throne of Israel will not be established, nor will the true faith stand except through tzedakah, says the prophet Isaiah. Tzedakah tikoinoni. And just this past Shabbos, the Haftarah ended, Shabbos Chazon, Haftarah of Isaiah ended with this verse, Sion b'mishpat tipodeh b'shaveh b'tzedakah, Zion will be redeemed. How will we get Mashiach here finally? Through judgment, which is Torah study, and those who return to her, to Zion, to Jerusalem, through charity. So tzedakah is vital as an identifying mark of a Jew, and it will even help bring Mashiach. If you're worried you give away your fortune, you'll go mechula, have no worries. A person will never become impoverished from giving tzedakah. The more you give, the more you get back. Ma'aseh tzedakah sholem, it brings peace. Everyone who's merciful evokes mercy from others, as it says, and he shall grant you mercy and shower mercy upon you and multiply you. Whenever a person is cruel and does not show mercy, his lineage is suspect. If, in fact, tzedakah is a genealogical mark of the seed of Abraham, and we are not charitable, we don't behave charitably, then someone might question our very basic Jewish credentials. Are we really Jewish? Maybe we imposters and we just joined the Jewish people, but because a Jew has to be compassionate and merciful and charitable. So, okay, the entire Jewish people are as brothers. You are all children unto God, so we're all brothers. Will a brother not show mercy to another brother? If not the brothers, who then? To whom do the poor of Israel lift up their eyes? To the non-Jews the anti-Semites. Clearly, our brothers are looking to us. I can say that today, Jews support non-Jewish charities exponentially, infinitely more than non-Jews would support Jewish charities. I once had a discussion with an IUA fundraiser, top guy, who used to run South African IUA, and then he got a promotion to New York. Okay, that's a big promotion. New York might probably be the biggest IUA office in the diaspora. Anyway, he tells me a story, and he was very proud of himself. He went to see a wealthy businessman, and he agreed to give $1 million to Israel. This is like maybe 25 years ago, so $1 million was a lot more than it is today. He says, I was very proud of myself. I got $1 million. Until the next morning, I opened up the New York Times and I saw the same guy just gave $9 million to Columbia University. Today, Columbia University has become a hotbed of anti-Semitism. in New York, the biggest Jewish city in the world. Okay, so Jews give non-Jewish charities, and non-Jews on rare occasions do give. We just found that Jeff Bezos' wife just gave $10 million to Africa Tikkun, which is run by Jews, founded by Chief Rabbi Harris and late Bertie Lubner, but it's a charity which helps the underprivileged Black South Africans. But anyway, okay. Anyone who turns his eyes away from giving tzedakah is described as rebellious, like he's worshiping idols. Quotes verses where you find the same language. It's called a sinner. Hashem is close to the cries of the poor, so one must be very careful not to cause a poor person to cry by not helping them, because when he will cry out to me, says God, I will listen, and I'm compassionate, and therefore the person who makes a poor individual cry out of a lack of compassion might get himself in trouble, God forbid. 4, whenever a person gives tzedakah to a poor person, but he does it unpleasantly, he throws the check at him on the floor and makes him grovel, he loses and destroys his merit. Even if he gives him 1,000 gold pieces, that's more than $1 million. So it's not just giving, it's how you give. Why? Because we are concerned not only with the poor person's financial well-being, but with their dignity. We'll soon see in the 8 levels of tzedakah, the famous 8 levels of tzedakah of the Rambam in this chapter, that the dignity is foremost. Helping them emotionally get through their difficult patch is as important or more important even than the quantity that you're giving. So if you give them 1,000 gold pieces, but you do it in an unpleasant way, you forfeit your reward. Instead, he should give him with a pleasant countenance, with happiness, commiserating with him about his troubles. He should show that he cares. He should give him words of encouragement, words of sympathy and comfort. 5. Now, sometimes you don't have any money. I don't always have coins in my car, and every street corner there's about 4 guys asking you. If a poor person asks for a donation, he has nothing to give him, at least conciliate him with words. Give him a nice word. Make him feel better. It is forbidden to scold a poor person or to raise one's voice against him while shouting. He's already brokenhearted and crushed. God will not scorn a broken and crushed heart, says the verse in Tehillim. Isaiah further says that reviving the spirit of the lowly is a divine attribute. Woe unto he who shames the poor. Woe be he. Instead, we should be like a father in mercies and words, as Hashem says he's a father to the destitute. 6. This is interesting because I often do collections. I have a Yom Tov appeal and I have a rabbi's discretionary fund. And sometimes I ask, usually before Pesach and before Rosh Hashanah, I ask the congregation, my congregation, to help out and to donate to the rabbi's Yom Tov appeal. And then I pass it on to poor families. They should be able to have a happier Yom Tov. So one who compels others to give tzedakah and motivates them to do so receives a greater reward than the person who actually gives it. I didn't start my appeal because I read this halacha, I must tell you. I did it because of the need, but this was very nice for me to read. V'hoya ma'aseh hatzdaka sholem. Ma'aseh hatzdaka, that means the deed of charity or causing the deed to happen. So collectors of charity and the like, we have the verse in Daniel, Matzdike Horabim, that those who bring merit to the many are like the stars of heaven. So, and often it's also because it's not an easy job. Baruch Hashem, I don't have a problem, but often charity collectors are abused. Not the guy doesn't just say, sorry, my cash flow is schwach. Sometimes you get abuse, and therefore the charity collectors get a special blessing from Hashem, because often they, first of all, it's not easy. I don't enjoy asking anybody for money, even if it's not for myself. And often you get not the nicest responses. So that's probably why those collectors are blessed as well. And here we come to the famous 8 levels of tzedakah, each one surpassing the other. The highest level, beyond which there is none, is a person who supports a Jew who has fallen into poverty by giving him a gift or an interest-free loan, or entering into a partnership with him, or giving him a job. So the highest form of tzedakah is when you don't actually give tzedakah. This is I think before the 8th. I don't think this is the first. I think where he's still getting to the first. Maybe not. Maybe this is the first. We'll see. So the first, or the highest for sure, is helping a person to avoid becoming a welfare recipient, the charity case. How do you help him? Help him get a job. Help him develop his business. Give him some cash so he can buy something and sell at a profit. Give him an interest-free loan. All of the above is the highest form. Again, why? Because there's the least indignity to the person. If he's getting a job, or he's getting a loan, or he's getting an investment, that's not charity. So there's no shame or humiliation on the part of the recipient, because the guy's making an investment. He's hoping to show a profit. It's not charity. But the giver might not be. I know many wonderful, generous people who give loans to people who ask them for a loan. They know full well the chances of them getting back this loan to be repaid are very slim indeed. And they give them the loan, and in their own head, it's tzedakah. They don't expect to get it back. If they get it back, it'll be a bonus. But it's given in the way of a loan, so there's less indignity to the recipient. Concerning this, the verse says in Vayikra, you shall support him, the stranger, the ray, shall live among you, implying that you should support him before he falls and becomes needy while he's sort of one of you. The next level is one who gives tzedakah to the poor without knowing to whom he gave, and without the poor person knowing from who he received. So we're going to keep track, okay? Let's try and keep track. We will see with the 8th. I want to see if the first one that we just said of giving an investment or a job is number 1, or this one here is number 1. But we'll soon see. We'll tally them up. So giving anonymously and doubly anonymous. The giver doesn't know who's getting it. The receiver doesn't know who gave it. How can that be? It can be if it's a charity fund. Like I said, I had the rabbi's appeal. The guy gives it to the rabbi, but he knows it's not for the rabbi. The rabbi's giving it away to someone else. So the poor person doesn't know who his donor is, and the donor doesn't know who the recipient is. In the temple, there was a secret chamber. The righteous would make donations there. There was a small little cubicle with a big box, and you put your donations in there, and nobody saw what you're giving. And poor people of distinguished lineage who could be trusted would go there and collect, also in secret. So when someone went in there, you didn't know, is he giving or is he taking? In Brooklyn, there was a famous guy who was had an organization to help people make Shabbos. You know, today we have a lot of such organizations here, food funds in Johannesburg. And so this guy did it in New York years ago. And I remember at the Rebbe's Farbrengen on a weekday before the Rebbe came down, and there were thousands of people already there, he would walk up and down the aisles with a big paper bag. And he was a very crude guy, but he was a wonderful heart. Everybody loved him. Shimshon Stock of blessed memory. And he would say, either put in or take out, but don't just sit there. So this box in the temple also, you could give or you could take. And it was completely anonymous. It was secret. Close to this is a charity fund, as I said. But those who give to a charity fund have to be able to trust the one who's managing it, that he's faithful, wise, and capable of administering it in a proper manner, as was Rabbi Hananya ben Teradian. What does he say about Hananya ben Teradian? Here, let's have a look. What number is it? Here, number 14. He was collecting both for the ordinary charity fund and for the special charity fund for Purim. The money from the two collections became mixed together to make sure the poor were not shortchanged. He compensated for any possible discrepancy from his own funds. So we don't expect people to be as righteous as Rabbi Hananya, but that's a good example to hold up. Okay, so sometimes it costs the guy himself. Next, a lower level is when the giver knows who he's giving to, but the poor person still doesn't know who he received it from. So again, because there's less indignity. The person doesn't know who he's got it from, he can look that guy in the face without feeling guilty, without feeling sheepish and indebted. Great sages who would go in secret and throw money into the doorways of the poor. This is a worthy way of giving charity and is a good quality to express if the trustees of the charitable fund are not commanded. If you don't feel it, you can put your faith and trust in the conductors of the charity funds in town, then you can give it to the poor yourself, but do it at night when they're sleeping and slip an envelope under the door. There's many stories of people who did that. The next level lower than that is when the poor person knows from whom he received it, but the donor doesn't know who he gave it to. So there were great sages who would bundle coins in a sheet and hang them over their shoulders, and the poor would come and take them, and they wouldn't be embarrassed because it was behind the back of the donor. A lower level is giving the poor person in his hand. So you're giving directly, so the donor knows who the recipient is, the recipient knows who the donor is, and you're giving to him in his hand. But why is this a higher level than the one to follow? Because you're giving it before he asks. You don't wait for him to come and beg. You know that he's having difficulties and you offer it to him because it's very difficult for many people to ask. A lower level is giving after he asks. A lower level is giving him less than what is appropriate, but at least you did it pleasantly. A lower level is giving with sadness. You give a krechts when you give it to him. Oh, this hurts me more, whatever. Okay, so let's see. We got 8 here. So we started with number 7. So 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So that's 8, right? So giving a guy a job is number one, right? Are we in agreement there?
Yep.
So giving a job is number one, then giving anonymously, both anonymous, that's number two. Okay, 15. Great sages made a habit of giving a coin, a pruta is a coin, to a poor person before they daven. As it says, Ani b'tzedek echze ponecha. With tzedek, with tzedakah, I will see your face. I'm davening to you, Hashem. I would love to be able to commune with you. I would love to be able to have a meaningful prayer session and feel that I'm connected to Hashem. Giving tzedakah before you daven is a good tool to help that Hashem should appear to you. You should have it. You should feel that Hashem is listening to you. There's a story of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, that he said he used to often get spiritual inspiration from his late Zayde, the founder of Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, author of the Tanya. And for some time, he didn't get it. And then one day he was going to shul in the morning to daven, and the butcher stops him on the way and asks him for a loan of a few ruble or whatever, so he could buy an animal and do business. So the Rebbe said to him, no problem, I'm just going to daven. As soon as I finish davening, I'll give you the money. He gets to shul, and then he has a second thought. He says, hang on. He's going to the market early in the morning. He needs the money now, not after I finish davening. He put his talus down, he ran back, and he found him, and he gave him the money. Came back to the shul, he put on his talus. As soon as he put on his talus, suddenly he felt the inspiration of the Zayda answering his question. So he saw the fulfillment of this verse, Ani b'tzedek echze ponecha. I will see your countenance in righteousness. So therefore, to give tzedakah before davening is a very good habit to get into. 16. Now, a lot of people say charity begins at home.
Can I ask that you mute everybody because there's quite a lot of noise in the background?
I was about to say that there seems to be a lot of noise here.
Thanks.
Okay. So I'm going to mute people, but you're able to unmute if you need to ask a question. Feel free.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Give me a second. Okay, so you're able to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question or a comment. Okay, so what was I saying? Yeah, people say charity begins at home. And the trouble is, they say that sometimes it ends at home. You know, the story of the guy, the rabbi came to ask him for tzedakah for a cause he was collecting. The guy says, Rabbi, I have a brother-in-law who's unemployed for the last 6 months. I have a sister who's an invalid, Nebuch. I have a nephew who's fallen on hard times. And if I don't give them, why should I give you? So, but the truth is that halachically, charity does begin at home. In fact, we have a greater obligation to give tzedakah to those, to next of kin, than to strangers. Even though no Jew is a stranger, we're all brothers, as we said before. But if you literally have a next of kin who is in need, that's your priority. So a person who gives money to his sons and daughters who are past the age of majority, okay, meaning they could already fend for themselves. Obviously, if you give your little children who you have to support, that's not tzedakah. But if they're already older and they could fend for themselves, and you're no longer obligated to support them, similarly, one who gives food to his parents, okay, he's not obligated, but if they're in need of tzedakah, then surely your parents should come before. So, in fact, that is part of tzedakah and a very important part of tzedakah. And precedence is established on one's degree of closeness. So the closer someone is to you, the more moral obligation you have that they should be your tzedakah recipients rather than just somebody in the community there. Anyone who gives food and drink to the poor and orphans at his table, meaning he invites people in need. You know, we speak of hachnosas orchim, of hospitality. Hospitality is not just having social engagements with your friends. You have your friends over this week and they have you over next week. It's very nice, very sociable, it's wonderful. But that's not really hospitality. Hospitality is someone who needs it. Hospitality is someone who doesn't have a roof over his head and you give him accommodation. Hospitality is someone who doesn't have food for Shabbos and you invite him to come to you for a meal. Otherwise, going to sit alone with a piece of bread and a fishbowl, and you invite him to have a good meal. That's tzedakah. So giving food to the poor and orphans at his table, when he calls out to Hashem, Hashem will answer him because he answered the poor. 17. Now, he says, for example, if you have servants, instead of giving the job to a servant, and if there are poor and orphan people who need parnasa, give them the job. Let them work in your household. Hire the poor and orphans who don't have any source of income. Let them work in your household. That's preferable. If the poor are members of one's household, at every hour he adds merit and mitzvah. So basically, you're giving them a job, you're supporting them, instead of supporting, again, strangers. 18. Okay, now we have a little bit of the last two halachas are instructions to the recipient. Until now, we've been speaking about the giver, how we have to give and what levels of tzedakah. Now, 18 and 19 is important instructions to the recipient, to one who needs to accept charitable contributions. A person should always construct himself. It's a mistake. It should be constrict himself, I'm sure. The Hebrew is yidchok. A person should constrict himself, meaning live more conservatively. And bear hardship even, do without, rather than appealing to people at large and making himself a burden on the community. Our sages put it as follows: let your Sabbath be like a weekday rather than to ask for charity. Meaning, if it rather have bread and fish balls and not have big Shabbos meals, rather than have to be a recipient of tzedakah. So what's the equivalent? There's a worldly proverb along those lines. Cut your bread. How does it go? You can unmute yourself and help me. What's that folklore saying? A proverb? Not better half a loaf, but cut your bread accordingly, something like that.
A half a loaf is better than none.
No. That not that one.
Not that one.
Something similar, like cut your bread accordingly, like
bread according to your needs, I think.
live according. That's what he means, but he's saying
Need your cloth.
Cut the cloth. Not really. Anyway, the point is, live a life of hardship, even, rather than become a welfare recipient. Even a distinguished sage who becomes poor should involve himself in a profession, even a degrading profession, rather than appeal to people at large for tzedakah. It is preferable for a person to skin the hide of animal carcasses. Not a very wonderful profession to have. Rather than then tell people, I'm a great sage, or I'm a kohen, or please help me out. And in the Gemara, we find quite a few Talmudic sages had ordinary jobs. Rabbi Yochanan was a cobbler, a shoemaker. Another rabbi was a blacksmith. One was a tailor. There's nothing wrong with having a regular job rather than be a burden on the community. Here he says, there were great sages who were wood choppers, porters of beams, water carriers, iron smelters, makers of charcoal. These are not exactly elevated professions. You're not a judge. But they did not ask anything from the community, nor did they accept gifts that were given to them. They didn't want to accept tzedakah. They would rather work in a menial, manual labor job. And finally, 19, any person who does not need to take charity and deceives people and makes out like he's poor when he's not, so he can collect from the charity fund in town, will not reach old age and die until he taka needs assistance. This is like a curse. You're bringing a curse upon yourself. If you deceive the charity dispensers and say you need it when you don't really need it, then God will make it that you should taka need it. So you don't want to do that. This is good advice. He's among those who Jeremiah said, cursed be a person who trusts in mortals. We should rather trust in Hashem to provide. Conversely, on the positive side, anyone who needs to take tzedakah, he's really suffering deprivation and cannot exist without it. For example, an elderly man, a sick person, or beset by afflictions, who cannot go and get a job, but he's proud, he's overly proud, and refuses to take help, he's like a murderer, because it's almost like suicide. If he cannot help himself because he's old and frail or sick or whatever, how's he going to survive? And people want to help him, and he says no, he's very proud. That's misplaced pride. He's be liable for his soul, and all that he has earned through his hardship is sin and guilt. But anyone who needs to take charity, but chooses to cause himself affliction and temporarily constrains himself and lives a life of deprivation so that he will not be a burden on the community, that's righteous. Yeah, he's suffering, but he's managing. He's eking out, he's surviving, but he doesn't want to take tzedakah. He'll survive. He won't die, but he'll just barely survive, and he refuses to take tzedakah. That is a virtue. And we are told that he will be blessed, that he will not reach old age and die before he provides sustenance for others from his own means. The converse of the previous one. The previous one, if you don't need to take and you take, you'll need to take one day. Here, if you should take and you don't take, one day you'll be privileged to be on the giving side, and you'll be able to be generous to others. That's a blessing. He will not die before he's able to provide for others from his own means. Concerning such a person, it says, we say it at the end of benching, Baruch HaGever Asher Yiftach B'Hashem. Blessed is the person who places his trust in Hashem. So he doesn't want to take tzedakah. He trusts God, that God will get him through this difficult patch, and he lives a life of constraint. and some deprivation, rather than take tzedakah, he'll survive. He's not going to die of starvation. And Hashem promises him that the time will come that he'll be able to be generous to others. Blessed be the merciful one who grants us assistance and who has helped us complete the laws of gifts to the poor. Baruch Hashem. Okay, feel free to unmute yourselves and we can discuss it if you like.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Sure, my pleasure.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a good week, everybody. Good
Yeah.
week,
Sei
Rabbi.
gesund, sei gesund.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, all.
Okay, be well.
Bye-bye.
Rabbi, good week.